So in terms of studying in the UK, if that's something you are thinking about doing, you're probably thinking about making an application to one of the top ranked universities in the UK, if that's Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, Durham, St Andrews, or a range of other very good institutions. If you are considering those, it's probably because of the reputation the universities have, not just in the UK, but globally. The advantage of studying at one of those universities is not just to show that you have a huge amount of academic potential, capability, and overall skills. It's also reflected in the fact that the graduates of those universities are very desirable in the job market, which is very important in today's world where we have really huge levels of competition. If you are looking at one of the top 20 universities in the UK, you will see that there are very high employability rates for graduates, usually with over 85% of graduates being employed within 6 months of graduating. In terms of loans, before you make an application, it's very important that you ascertain which fee band you'll be in. If you are a home student or within the EU, you should be able to qualify for a fee that is just over £9,000 per year. If, on the other hand, you are an international student, the fees are quite a bit higher. So it's around the region of £17,000 to £18,000 a year. Depending upon your country of origin, you might qualify for a loan, or you might have the government within your country offering to pay some or all of your fees. You'll be able to find out this information by contacting the universities in question, by talking to your school, and where applicable, talking to your embassy.
So British universities are one of the most diverse universities in the world. As many as 40% of students come from overseas. So they will have many multicultural events and societies and clubs. So that gives you a very good opportunity to learn about different cultures, meet students from different countries, different backgrounds, as well as students from your own country. UK universities also offer a variety of degree options, and they are well known for that. You might be familiar with the foundation courses and foundation degrees. The difference between them is that the foundation course is the year leading to the first year of undergraduate degree, and foundation degree is actually the first and second year of the undergraduate degree that has a top-up option, and you can finish your undergraduate degree through the foundation course. They are quite flexible in terms of entry requirements, so it might be a good entry point for some students who didn't achieve high grades, or they didn't achieve English language requirements. There are around 3,500 courses and degrees on offer from more than 100 different institutions, so lots to choose from. Undergraduate degrees in the UK will lead to your bachelor degree. It would be a Bachelor of Arts, a Bachelor of Engineering, or Bachelor of Science, depending what course you choose to study. Undergraduate degrees in the UK university is one of the shortest, as it takes 3 years to complete. It can take 4 years if you decide to do an integrated master degree, or if your undergraduate course offers a year abroad or work experience. You can study single subject, for example, history or biology, chemistry, or you can do a combined degrees. They are mostly offered by Scottish universities. They also take 4 years to complete. And you can study 2 completely unrelated degrees. So you can study biology with, for example, management, or history with language. Very attractive are degrees apprenticeships. They are sponsored by the company. Basically, your tuition fee is paid by the company. You also are offered work experience that is paid. So they might take longer to complete, but once you complete them, you will have a very solid work experience and no debts to repay.
If you are thinking about making an application to Oxford or Cambridge, there are a couple of things you should bear in mind whilst making your decision. As you will probably know from conducting some initial research, Oxford and Cambridge are both collegiate universities, which means that rather than applying directly to a university or a faculty, you make an application to a specific college. You will find a number of colleges, in fact the vast majority, will accept undergraduate students. However, you should be aware that some colleges are only for mature students or graduates. If you are making an application to Cambridge, you should be aware that most of the colleges are going to offer your degree. At Oxford, it is a little bit different. And if you are going for a degree, for example, like CAR, which is classical archaeology and ancient history or classics, it will be a much smaller number of colleges to pick from. So just be mindful of that when you start to make your decision. The courses offered at both universities are very academic, and you will find if you're comparing maths at Cambridge versus maths at Oxford, you will see many, many similarities. However, there are some differences in terms of the degrees you can take and the structure of them. As an example, you can apply to Oxford to read for a degree in physics. At Cambridge, you would need to make an application for physical and natural sciences before you could start to specialise in physics. In terms of the actual course structures, you might be interested to know which modules you take in each year, when you can choose electives, and the form of examination. Unlike many other universities in the UK, you do not really have the option to be assessed via coursework, though in most degrees you will be offered the opportunity to submit a dissertation. The entry requirements for both universities are very high, usually higher than other universities in the UK. The typical standard offers for Cambridge are slightly higher than at Oxford. You might also, when you decide on your subject, you need to know really what your predicted grades are and whether you are taking the appropriate subjects for the course you are considering. You can find this information on their websites. You should make sure that you look at a collegiate level as well, because some of the colleges have slightly different requirements from others. You might, in certain circumstances, find certain colleges that deviate from the standard offer as well. This is particularly important if you are considering natural sciences or maths. Most of the degree courses offered at Oxford and Cambridge now require you to sit an admissions test. If that is the case, you will find the information on the faculty websites. However, you might find that an admissions test at one university suits your abilities more than at the other university, so take that into consideration. An example of that would be law, where at Oxford you have to sit the LNAT, and at Cambridge you sit the Cambridge Law Test. Some degree courses will also require written work. If that is the case and you're making an application to Oxford, it's usually all colleges that require written work to be submitted. At Cambridge, it's done on a collegiate basis. So if you feel that that's something that could help your application, that might be something you'd like to consider as well. The other main point that differentiates Oxford and Cambridge is the percentage invited to interview. At Cambridge, they typically interview around 95% of applicants, and that's across all subjects. If you apply to Oxford, however, for some subjects, the percentage invited to interview can be as low as 9%. So that might be something that you want to take into consideration as well.
Thank you, Sheridan. I have a question. Supposedly to apply to Oxford or Cambridge, and we have to say or because you cannot apply to both. Is that correct?
Unless you're an organ scholar.
Okay. So to apply to one of the universities, I'm sure that most people have straight A's or A stars even. What do you think would make one candidate stand out from the crowd? what do you think is like the determining factors for receiving an offer from your experience?
There are a few things. Performing very well in the admissions test will certainly help. Beyond that, if you are doing any external competitions, if it's run by the university in question, like one of their essay competitions, or the Maths Olympiad, Physics Olympiad, anything like that, or work experience, they're really looking for academic potential. So it's not necessarily what you've done, it's how well you've done given your circumstances to date.
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Ivona.
So one of the most important decisions you will make is to choose your university course. That's a very hard decision because there are around 37,000 of undergraduate university courses on offer at British universities. So that goes on the basis that you have identified your passion and interest for the subject, you know which subject you like to study. Next step would be to choose the right university course. It is also difficult from the point of view that many courses have the same name, but they're actually quite different. So you really need to research university courses in depth. You do that by understanding the core modules and the optional modules. So are they in line with your interest, and are you interested in those modules that the course is offering? You need to look at the course structure, how many lectures you would have that would be taught, how much independent work you are expected to do. Does this course have a year abroad, or does it include work experience? Also, it's very important to look at the assessment. If it's more based on exams or more based on essays, and depending where you perform better, you might decide to basically choose that course.
Once you have chosen your course, especially if you're thinking about applying to Oxbridge, it's really important that you create a timeline so that you use whatever time you have before you make the application and before you have the interviews as effectively as you can. This is because when you apply to these universities, you need to show that you've gone far beyond the A-level syllabus or IB or whichever system you're following, so that you're showing that you have the, I suppose, academic maturity to study independently. You will be assessed to some extent on your subject knowledge, but more than that, it's your ability to apply what you know to unseen situations. This is actually quite a difficult skill to develop, as it's typically not how students are taught in school. So that's a challenge for you to start working on that before you submit your application. When you think about work that you would like to complete independently, it should be something that reflects your interests, but also try to find something that you understand. The worst thing you can do at this stage is to pick something so far beyond what you could possibly understand to try to impress the admissions tutors. It won't do if it becomes clear that you don't really understand the underlying concepts. You might like to think about work experience and attending conferences. The work experience is only really going to help your application if it's relevant to your degree, or if it has enabled you to develop skills that could be translated to what will be required for your chosen subject. A number of students attend conferences related to their subject. However, as a lot of these conferences either require you to pay to attend or for you to travel, it's not essential that you do these. And more conferences are now online and it's free to attend. So if you can't attend a paid conference for whatever reason, try to find some online, as you might find those very interesting. Oxford and Cambridge do run competitions, especially essay-based competitions, so you might like to consider entering one of those if it's pertinent to your course. Otherwise, it might be that your school runs certain things like the Maths Challenge, the Physics Olympiad, and you might like to take advantage of those or any societies run by your school. If you are pursuing a humanities course, it's really important that you get used to debating and that you feel comfortable portraying your point of view and that you can substantiate anything you say. That's due to the format and the nature of the interviews. You must show that you are happy to communicate, because at Oxbridge you learn through the tutorial supervision style system. And it's one of those things, as my tutor used to say, if you train hard, you fight easy. So that's something that you should start doing as early as you can. If your degree course has an admissions test, and it probably will, you need to find out as soon as you can what the format of that test is. There should be previous tests or sample tests online for you to work through. And your school might also give you some material, but if that is the case, please do not leave it to the last minute. Successful applicants usually spend around 10 months preparing for these admissions tests. And whilst a few are sat at interview, the majority are sat about 4 to 5 weeks ahead of the interviews. So that's the end of October or the very beginning of November.
Choosing a university is also extremely important. Hopefully, by researching your undergraduate course, you have narrowed down the number of universities that you would consider. What you would consider also when choosing university, it's what is the academic reputation of the university, or what is academic reputation of the department where you want to study. You would be spending there minimum 3 years, maybe longer, so the location might be very important to you. You might want to live very close to home so that you can go and visit your family during the weekends, or you might like to live further away so that you can experience different parts of the countries. Cost of living would differ in different towns, so that aspect might be also important to you, or if the town is larger, you might have better prospects to find a part-time job. You might consider accommodation, because some of the universities offer accommodation only during their first year. So then you would have to find your own accommodation for the remaining time of your studies. Some of the universities are campus-based, so they might offer accommodation for the whole duration of your undergraduate degree. The best way to find out about university is to attend the open days. And that, of course, it's not possible at the moment due to the current situation, but you can turn it to your advantage and visit more universities by attending their virtual events. All the universities have virtual talks and virtual open days. They all have university buddies. That's the current students who you can talk to. You can ask them about the student life, about the town, about all these important points that we have just mentioned. So the most important is to do your research, talk to people who are currently studying there, talk to the lecturer, talk to you can email admission department to get answers to specific questions.
Ivona, may I just ask you a question regarding the league table for universities? Is it a good reference for choosing the university or a course, and how do you use it?
Yes, we discussed this with Sheridan, if it's useful to start mentioning the league tables. And yeah, that's how you can find out the academic reputation, how they are placed in the UK or how they are placed in the world. But then It depends what you are going to study. So it's important that you search through the league tables by the subject or by the subject that you want to study, because suddenly the position in the league table of that university you are considering might change significantly.
Okay.
So I think they are useful as a guidance, but then it's important to do your own research and get the feel of the university by attending all these virtual events that are in place at the moment.
Great, thank you.
One of the things students agonise the most over each year with Oxbridge is choosing which college is right for them. It can feel quite overwhelming, especially if all of the colleges are offering your degree course. Since you can only make an application to one, there are quite a few things you might like to consider to help you to create a shortlist. The first is the level of competition. So at both universities, you can expect to have 8 able applicants per place, but some colleges are slightly more competitive than others. You might want within your college to be one of a few students studying your subject and to know everyone doing that subject in your college, or you might feel that you would rather be in a larger group. So for example, at Cambridge, at my college, there were 4 of us doing maths versus Trinity where there were 40 doing maths. That can actually make quite a difference in terms of how you study within your college. So that might be something you would like to consider. The size of the college itself. All of the universities have excellent facilities, and at Cambridge you are guaranteed accommodation throughout the duration of your degree. At Oxford, for accommodation, it varies a little more between the colleges. So that might be something you want to think about in terms of living in Oxford and finding private accommodation. Different colleges have different facilities, especially in terms of sports. So if you're a keen sports player and you want to play for your college rather than the university, you might like to look into that. The colleges vary in size quite tremendously. So if you would like to know everyone in your year, you might like to look at some of the smaller colleges. And if you would rather have slightly more grandeur and you're happy being more a face in the crowd, then that's something you can think about as well. The entry requirements are usually the same across all of the colleges. There are occasional differences, so make sure you're aware of those. Again, you can find that information by looking at the faculty and the individual college websites. Both universities are very old and overall very traditional. However, there are some more modern colleges. And if you feel that the Oxbridge stereotype doesn't really apply to you, or you don't feel particularly comfortable, you might prefer to consider the more modern colleges where you don't have to wear a gown to dinner and where you don't have grace in Latin and all of the pomp and ceremony you get at some of the older colleges. At Cambridge, it's still possible to attend female-only colleges. They would be Newhall, which is now Mary Edwards, Newnham, and Lucy Cavendish if you are a mature student. At Oxford, all of the colleges are mixed. It doesn't make a huge difference in terms of how you learn, because quite often you will be having tutorials or supervisions at different colleges anyway, but it can affect your day-to-day living arrangements. In terms of making an application, you might want to consider whether your school has a relationship with any of the colleges. It won't make much of a difference to your application, but it's something you might want to think about. It is slightly less important if there are multiple people from your school applying, especially if it's for the same subject. So you shouldn't get lost in that. You should still make sure that you're considering all of the colleges that are available to you. Some people feel, especially coming from a state school, that they don't want to attend a college that is heavily dominated by the private sector. your application will be judged blind anyway, meaning that the tutors won't have a preference as to whether you're at a state or private school. But it might affect the feel of the cohort. If that matters to you and you would like a more forward-thinking college, or you want to attend one that's got more of a state school or a private bias, then you can find this information out online. But rather than just looking at the statistics, I would encourage you to visit the colleges, because they might have quite different feels from what you're expecting. If you really can't decide and you find that you're spending a disproportionate amount of time choosing your college, it is possible to make an open application where you apply to the university directly and they will allocate a college to you. A number of people do this. Sometimes international students do this when they're unable to visit the university. It will not improve your chances of securing an offer. And usually, whilst people struggle to decide which college they want to go to, there are usually a couple of colleges that they do not wish to go to. By making an open application, you risk being allocated to one of those colleges, and you cannot ask to be reallocated at that point. So most people do opt to apply to a specific college. Another thing to consider at this stage, if you apply to Cambridge to a specific college, you will be interviewed by that college. You may end up getting an offer from a different college, but you will be interviewed at the college to which you applied. If you apply to Oxford and you apply to a college that is very oversubscribed for that subject, there's a chance that you could be reallocated to a different college before the interviews take place. This is done randomly, and if that happens to you, you can't request to stay with the original college. So it doesn't happen too often, but you should be aware that it can happen.
Thank you, Sheridan. Could you please clarify, what do we define by a mature student?
Yes, a mature student who is someone who is 21 years or older when they start their degree course, and it's someone who does not hold a degree from a higher institution when they start the degree course.
So somebody who either finished school late or took a gap year and then decided to apply first time.
Exactly, or military service. One thing I would point out is that all colleges will accept applications from mature students.
Okay.
However, some students, especially if they're substantially older, maybe in their 40s or 50s, would rather be in an environment with slightly older people rather than people in their early 20s. So mature colleges are really for them. So if you are in your early 20s, for example, you still might want to look at the whole range available.
And is there a limit to a mature age?
No, there's not at all. In some colleges at the moment, I think they have some undergraduates in their 70s.
Oh, lovely.
Anyone?
There is always a chance, yes. Thank you. Next slide.
So all the applications must be submitted through UCAS, which stands for Universities and Colleges Admission Service. You have up to 5 choices. You can apply for only 1 course if you like, but for maximum 5 courses. And they can be different courses at the same university, or the same courses at 5 different universities, or any combination of these two. There are 2 main deadlines for applications. So 15th of October would be the deadline for Oxford, Cambridge, Medical School, Dentistry and Veterinary Sciences. Main deadline for all the other courses would be 15th of January this year, 2021. The colleges treat all the applications equally, so it doesn't matter if you apply on the day when the applications open, which is 1st of September, or if you apply on the last day, on the 15th of January, they will consider all the applications in the equal way.
Ivona, could I just clarify one thing? After 15th of January, is there a chance to apply for students, particularly maybe international students, Could they still apply for example, September 2020? Are there still applications that could be submitted?
Yes, of course. After 15th of January, you can still apply, so they can still apply at the moment. And it's just the main competitive courses might be already, they might be already full. So if you want to have the biggest chance to apply for the top university for the most competitive course, you would apply until the 15th of January. But if you still like a course that is on offer at the moment, or even in August, you can still apply for that course and start in this September 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, carry on, please.
That's okay. One important information is that the university wouldn't know which other universities you are applying to. So they don't know if you are applying to only their own university, or they don't know if you have applied to 4 other universities, and they don't know how you rated them. So is it your first choice, or is it your 5th choice? How did you put them on applications? They cannot see that. After the deadline of 15th of January, universities would consider your applications, and most of the students would receive an offer. If you have applied for the very competitive courses, you would have, receive the offer that is conditional. That means they would give you grades that you need to achieve in your A-level or IB exams. Some of the universities now offer unconditional offers as well. That means regardless your results, you would be able to start your university course in September. You would have few weeks to reflect on the choices, and you would have to decide about your firm choice, which is really your first choice, and you should make that choice if you really want to study at that university. And you would also choose an insurance choice, which is usually a grade or 2 lower. In case you don't make your grades, you can still study at that second insurance choice. The rest of the choices you would just basically not accept their offer.
Okay.
Going back to the timeline that we were talking about a little bit earlier, for Oxbridge, as well as medicine, veterinary medicine and dentistry, you need to make your application by the 15th of October through UCAS. And there's some important things coming up shortly after that deadline. If you have applied for Oxbridge and you are invited to interview, those interviews take place usually in the first 2 weeks of December. It's possible that something might start at the end of November, especially for Oxford. You usually go for a few days during the interview procedure, but it's around those times, so you should be prepared from the end of November. The admissions tests typically are sat at the end of October or the beginning of November. The universities, in particular Oxford, then use this to consider which students they would like to call for interview. Usually students start preparing for the admissions tests early in the calendar year of application. So it's around 10 months of preparation. Obviously it's possible to do it in less time, but the more time you have to prepare, the easier it will be and the less stressful it should be. A number of students opt for mentoring to help with their application, which is where they start to pursue their subject beyond the scope of the classroom. So they start to develop their own academic interests, but it will transcend any A-level or IB work they're doing. Generally, this goes on for about a year before the interviews. And the aim of this is so that students have a far deeper understanding of and appreciation for their chosen subject, but it also prepares them for the interview format, which is very much like an Oxford tutorial or a Cambridge supervision. And in the interview, they're actually assessing how well they feel you would learn in that system. because at Oxbridge you work independently the vast majority of the time, but you will have supervisions or tutorials each week and possibly lab work, and that is the time where you have to learn. So if you're a very bright student but that system wouldn't work for you, you're probably better suited to a different university. Personal statements are submitted as part of the formal UCAS application, so they need to be ready by the 15th of October. Usually I advise students to have finished it by the end of September, because you don't want any last minute rushing. Usually students will start to consider their personal statement and to write drafts in March of the year of application. This is to make sure that they are happy with the areas of academic interest that they're saying that they have, and it really can help to focus the mind in terms of any reading they need to do, any additional preparation, any conferences, any work experience, because it's very easy and very common for students to write in their personal statement that they've read things that they haven't read, or they've considered journal articles that they don't understand, or they have got certain work experience that in the end they weren't able to get. Very, very easy for the tutors to work that out, and it's essential that your personal statement is completely honest. Everyone has the intention of writing an honest personal statement, but sometimes if you've not read work you had intended to read, it can become quite obvious, and you don't want that to happen during your interview. So personal statements, you should really think of that block as being from March to September in your year of application. The interviews at Oxbridge are nowhere near as bad as people make out, but usually students at the age of sort of 16, 17, 18 haven't had much interview experience, if any, and it can be quite daunting. There's a reasonable chance that whoever's interviewing you will be a world expert in their field. You may even have more than one interviewer, and to a young person that can seem quite intimidating. If you have the opportunity to have any mock interviews, I would encourage you to do that. Ideally, not with your teachers, know them, and so there is a certain amount of familiarity there. You know if the teachers are likely to be harsh or if they're likely to be overly kind. So if you could have interviews with people you don't know, ideally Oxbridge graduates, one-to-one and panel interviews, it will really help to prepare you. Usually the first few interviews go badly for everyone, but it is a very sharp learning curve, and if you have 5 to 10 interviews, you should be prepared for what you would face in December.
Thank you, Sheridan. Just at the end of the seminar or webinar, please stay with us. We're going to tell you a little bit more about personal statement and how we can help prepare for it. Okay.
So the UCAS applications has several parts. It will have the choice of the undergraduate degrees you have made and your personal details. It would also include your grades from GCSE exams and your predicted grades from IB and A-levels. And it also includes personal statement and references. There is a common myth that nobody has time to read personal statement and references, and hence they are not that important, or they are not important at all. So this is not true, because if you are applying for a very competitive course and there are no interviews and there are no exams that you sat for that particular course, then this is the only way how they can distinguish you from other applicants. Usually they receive a huge number of applications for the top competitive courses. So this is your way how you can stand out, how you can persuade the admission team that you are suitable for that course. And they also have very limited time. they might have 5 to 10 minutes to read your personal statement. So it really needs to be very well written, and it needs to be focused why you are the suitable candidate to study at that university for that particular course.
In terms of your personal statement, you should be thinking about what will make an admissions tutor want to take you over however many other students there are, usually at least 7, vying for the same place. Usually, if you're going for a top university or if you're going for Oxbridge, the grade profiles will be very, very similar. You'll have students who have at least 10 GCSEs, usually 8s and 9s. You will have students who are doing at least 3 A-levels, usually at least 2 of those being A-stars, or doing the IB, usually in the range of 43 to 45. The tutors know you're very good at what you're doing in school. That isn't the issue. You need to show that you have the drive to do well in their degree course, which is going to be very different and much, much harder than anything you will have had to encounter before. So because of that, you need to bear in mind, on paper, all of the applicants in terms of grades, even in terms of the admissions tests, are probably fairly similar. So you need to show that you have a huge amount of drive when it comes to your course, and that you understand that studying a degree at undergraduate level is very different from studying the same subject at school. You only can show this if you can demonstrate that you've gone far beyond your A-level or IB remit. Some students try to do this by doing EPQs, AEAs, step papers, but you need to do really much more than that. It's also important that you consider, especially if you're going for a broad tripos like land economy, that you like all parts of the degree. Yes, you'll be able to specialise and to choose electives, but you need to show the admissions tutor that you're happy to embrace all of the modules. Now, everyone at university will be studying some things they don't particularly like and some things they love, but you need to show a real maturity and intellectual curiosity within your personal statement. Anything you include, you must understand. A lot of students, you know, and I read hundreds of personal statements a year. A number of students, especially for science subjects, put in areas of interest that they may well like, but they could not possibly understand. And they do that, I think, believing that that's going to impress the admissions tutors. It really won't. You're showing your tutors, if anything, that you don't know that you're out of your depth. So pick things that you enjoy, but things that are accessible. Your school might be advising you on that anyway in terms of things you can read, and you might be looking at extension work in Oxbridge classes or in different societies. You don't have to look at things that disinterest you. There's so many topics within each degree course and each tripos that you can focus on what interests you. But try not to be blinkered, and by the same, you know, in the same vein of thinking, be very specific in terms of what you've read. So if you've not read an entire book, for example, state the chapters that you have read. Because it's possible. I mean, in my interviews, I don't think anything ever came up from my personal statement, but you must be prepared in case it can form the basis of part of your interview. And that is particularly important if you say that you have an interest that happens to align with the research interests of your interviewer. You may well know who your interviewer is ahead of time, but they're always last-minute substitutions. Someone's away, someone's ill, so you can never guarantee who your interviewers are going to be. So make sure that you've covered all of your bases. Your personal statement should never be, you know, just written and submitted. Most students that I work with will do at least 6 to 8 drafts. Unfortunately, as it is on UCAS, it's very, very limited space. And so you might like to start, not by writing your statement, but trying to work out in bullet points what your motivations are. Why do you love your chosen course? Why are you pursuing that over joint schools or other similar degree courses? And try to avoid cliches. You have only got 4,000 characters. Do not waste any of that time with phrases like, I have always wanted to understand the world around me. Doesn't really add a huge amount about you. So you've got to be quite strict with yourself in terms of what makes the final cut and what doesn't. Your enthusiasm for your subject is not shown by saying, I have always loved English. It is shown by what you have done to demonstrate your love for your subject. So it's always actions rather than words. In terms of work experience, if it's relevant to your degree course, perfect. You may even have the opportunity to discuss that in one of your interviews. If it is not related to your degree course, then you may choose to include it, but you don't have to. It would be much more important to talk about something you've done, a supercurricular activity relevant to what you're choosing to pursue. In terms of admissions tutors, they are to some extent interested in activities that you pursue in your spare time, but only really if you pursue them at a high level. Because if you pursue something at a high level, it demonstrates the qualities that they're really looking for in their students, a certain amount of perfectionism, an attitude that you don't give up, that if you fail, you carry on until you succeed. Beyond that, even though it's called a personal statement, and I see this a lot with international students, they don't really want to know what you do in your free time. They don't want to hear that you enjoy seeing your friends and watching films. If it's relevant to your degree course and it shows that you are better at that, include it. If it is about you as a person, unless you're going for medicine where you need to have certain caring aspects to your personality, you should not include it. As a general rule of thumb, about 85% to 90% of your personal statement should be academic, and the remaining 10% might be that you play grade 8 violin, or you're on a national sports team, or something like that. When you read your personal statement at the end, you must think, is it promoting you in the best possible light for your subject and not really as an individual?
Okay, so we're almost saying that for the personal statement, you have to start thinking about it a year or two in advance in order to actually build the experience that is needed to include it in the statement itself. Is that right?
For some subjects like medicine, yes, because for work experience, it's not really enough to say that you've worked in a hospital for 1 week. They want to see, sustained regular work experience over a 1 to 2 year period before you make your application. For some other subjects, it doesn't matter in the same way. If you're going for a science subject, certainly if you're going for a humanities subject, work experience isn't quite as relevant. And if you are only able to secure work experience at the end of year 11, so when you've just taken your GCSEs, or at the end of year 12, so the first year of your sixth form, that should be fine. But if that's the case, you should be able to show that you are reading extensively and you are attending online conferences and you've just got a huge amount of intellectual curiosity for your subject.
Yeah, okay, I'm sure there will be lots of questions about that, so you could either write it in the chat or we can arrange a personal consultation. Thank you, Sheridan.
I think it's also important to mention one more thing regarding personal statement, and that's that there are so many information online that you can use how to write personal statement, and also look at the personal statements that have been written to a very high standard. So the important thing is one can look at them for inspiration, but don't be tempted to copying them. Otherwise, universities are currently using softwares, they're like similarity detection softwares, and they will know that this personal statement have been submitted before, and they would not be able to consider your application further.
Okay, yeah, very important point. Thank you.
So the impact of COVID-19 and the current situation, we are all feeling as a society from different spectrums on our economy and health and on families and individually. It definitely had impacted education as well, as all schools were closed, all universities are closed from middle of March, and that is also going to impact the current students who are applying to university. So you might find out that you are unable to attend the summer camp because it had been cancelled this year, or you might find out that, of course, you're unable to do your work experience. And I think, especially for medical students, that's very important, and universities would be understanding about the current situation. But you have to become very creative of what you can include in your personal statement that would make you stand out. So there are lots of online courses that are free that you can attend. You can attend university lectures online, and more universities are putting more information online that you can attend and get inspired. Maybe that would be the lead to read article that had been published in the area of your interest, or read a book from the lecturer if you enjoyed the lecture. So you have to look at the online resources available. You also have to be very proactive with all the virtual events, and we have talked already about university tours and open days. So you would have to find out yourself if your school is not supporting you, when they are happening, how to register, how many you want to attend. So stay proactive. This current year 13, it might of course impact as well, and they felt the impact because they were unable to sit their A-level exams and IB exams. It might be also the uncertainty of the education offered by university next academic year might lead to some deferrals, but don't get kind of worried about it, because we still don't know how university would react to that and what would be, there might be a guidance from the government. It's still quite uncertain. So the most important for the students who are applying to university this year is to stay positive, to focus on what you can do in this current situation, how you can make your application and your personal statement interesting and include as as many relevant information that you can find online as possible.
Okay.
Actually, this is very linked to also clearing and adjustment this year. Clearing means that university would offer all the courses that still have spaces, and you can still apply to them. And you can start searching, because this would be changing on a daily basis, and university would be adding new courses that are becoming available to them, as some students might not reach their predicted grades. On the result day at 9 o'clock in the morning for A-levels, 13th of August this year, you will find out if you have met your predicted grades. And if you did, that's very good news, and congratulations, you would have confirmed place at your chosen university. If you didn't, however, achieve your required grades, you can still apply through clearing and start studying this September 2020. more than 60,000 students apply through clearing this academic year. So it's something, it's a service of UCAS that it's used widely. Adjustment, it's something that not many people are that familiar with, but it's quite important to mention, especially this year, as if you are a student who have been studying throughout the year, you have been submitting work of a very high standard, you have done really well in your mock exams, you might actually achieve grades better than your predicted grades. And that would enable you to use adjustment and apply for a course that is maybe more competitive. Maybe around only 800 students in a normal situation use adjustment, but it might be maybe widely used this year.
Yeah.
Those students who didn't make their grades, but they also don't like to apply through clearing, they might not like the courses that are still available, and they might decide to take a gap year, and they might decide to also retake their exams. It is a little bit uncertain at the moment if the IB retakes will take place this autumn, so we might need to wait for the guidance from the schools and the government, and hopefully retakes in next spring for A-levels and IBs would happen. So you might study and improve your grades and then apply to university with the 1 year gap now.
Usually, if you feel after your exams that maybe they haven't gone to plan, or you've had additional exams such as STEP as part of your offer, even if you're fairly confident, it's worth preparing for all of the different eventualities. If you feel that you have not secured the required grades for your firm or your insurance offer, you should visit the UCAS website to see which universities are offering spaces in clearing. You might find that there are spaces available at another very good university for the same course, or a course that is very, very similar. But these are updated on a very regular basis. So even if you do an initial search and you can't find anything for you, keep on going back to the website to see if there's a different university or a different course that might appeal. Once you have done that, since these are probably universities you've not considered before, make sure that you look at the entry requirements on the university websites and you look at the course structures. Because even though this might be, you know, your plan B if things don't go well, you also want to make sure that you are finding a course that you actually want to study, because it will be the next 3 to 4 years. You might find that there are different courses that you haven't considered before. A lot of people looking at medical related courses, for example, might like to consider some of the neuroscience degrees. So you might find something that actually appeals to you that you hadn't thought about to date. When you have a short list, it's very important that you're proactive with that. You might also want to talk to the higher education officer within your school for advice. They might be able to suggest some things because they will have worked with you for some period of time, so they'll know your preferences. They might be able to suggest some things you've not thought about. The most important thing though, if you do not get the results that you need, you must be available on the actual results day. It would be essential in that case, if you're not offered a place by your firm or your insurance offer, that you can call the universities themselves. You can't have someone else calling on your behalf. It doesn't really show great determination and enthusiasm to do the degree if you've got someone else calling to ask if you can have a place. So you must be available on that day. And you must know which departments you're going to call and which numbers. So that's why you must prepare ahead of time. if you call a university and they offer you a place, you must be able to make a decision there and then. You can't say, can I have a few days to think about it? So make sure that you're only calling universities that you would like to attend for a course you would like to study. Otherwise, you might be in a situation where you miss out altogether.
Yeah. And yes, you cannot call on yourself by yourself, but you could have us on the on the side of the phone helping you choosing the right courses and making the decision, because that's what we do with our clients. We lead them, especially in this year. I think will be particularly interesting because we don't know how the COVID will reflect on the marks, and we're expecting to support maybe more students than usual on the clearing day.